Hey guys, welcome back to the Bitcoin Bunker. I'm your host, Satoshi Down Under. And in this series, or on this channel, we're digging into Bitcoin. And each episode I'm going to try and dispel some myths around Bitcoin and also deepen your understanding about the power of Bitcoin and what it could mean for improving humanity and the corrupt system that we currently live in. So previous episodes we've talked about gold having a good year last year against Bitcoin. A little bit underwhelming for us Bitcoiners, but I think we'll soon play catch up. We discussed what the Bitcoin halving was, that Bitcoin is hard capped at 21 million coins, fixed supply. We've talked about fiat money and how that's printed basically whenever the central banks require it, which is what causes inflation and devalues our purchasing power over time, no matter what currency you're in. We talked about, can Bitcoin put an end to war or reduce the severity and length of wars if governments are no longer able to print money and send it off to Ukraine and other places to fund wars. And we've talked about the Iranian rial hyperinflating a week or two ago, and how if you had preserved some of your wealth in Bitcoin, you basically ended up hitting an all-time high in your Bitcoin value against the rial. We also discussed that hyperinflation is probably coming to more countries than just Iran, as it has with Argentina, Venezuela, Zimbabwe in the past, and a lot of other countries. I mean, the debt-based Ponzi scheme or Ponzi system that we live in of fiat currency basically says that is the end game for all currencies. But this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about Bitcoin and energy, and we'll touch on the mining process a little bit, but really I wanted to talk about Bitcoin and energy and how most people think that Bitcoin is just some internet money, some made up thing, not backed by anything. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Really what Bitcoin is backed by is energy. And we'll talk about the Bitcoin mining process briefly so that we can understand what I mean by that. So Bitcoin mining, just show you a few photos here. Basically, this is a mining facility in Iceland. What they use is ASIC miners. They're basically specific single task miners that are trying to solve the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, which Bitcoin's built on. It's a cryptographic puzzle that each of these miners put electrical energy into trying to solve this puzzle every 10-minute block. And if they are successful, they win that block. And we covered in the Bitcoin halving the components of winning a block. Basically, at the moment, it's 3.125 Bitcoin is the reward, plus whatever fees went into that block of transactions. So we checked out mempool.space. If you haven't seen that video, go back through, get a bit more familiar with what the halving is, how the mempool works, Bitcoin securing transactions every 10 minutes. But essentially these are the machines, or one version of the machines that are used. So how does this tie to energy? Well, all of these mining operations, or solo miners, if it's me running one of these at home, we're all competing with our electrical energy to secure the next block of transactions in the hopes to get that reward. So on the surface, people might say, okay, Bitcoin uses a lot of energy. This has been one of the articles, one of the headlines of Bitcoin over the years. It should be shut down. It uses too much electricity. It's boiling the oceans, blah, blah, blah. But I would like to posit a different theory, right? So yes, it uses a lot of energy, and as the Bitcoin network grows and competition grows to secure these Bitcoins that are now worth 90,000 US, what miners are incentivized to do to stay profitable is reduce their inputs, right? Reduce their electrical costs, their energy costs. So what Bitcoin's really doing is it's saying, here's a free and open market, it's decentralized, anyone from anywhere on the planet can compete to win this block, right? To solve this puzzle and receive this Bitcoin subsidy. In doing so, they're supporting the network, right? So they're securing the transactions with the nodes, and that's what's building the blockchain, all the blocks of transactions, right? So if I'm a Bitcoin miner and I'm running one of these units here at home, living in Australia, that's going to cost me a hell of a lot in electricity, right? And the hash rate of one of these machines, I'm not going to be able to compete with someone running 50 or 100 or thousands of these, right? In one of these giant mining facilities. Unless I can get the energy for free, right? So renewables like solar, I could install solar in my home, and instead of putting the excess energy back into the grid, government here gives you, or power company here gives you bugger all for the energy that you put back into the grid. So what I could do is I could redirect it and run one of these miners. Now, I don't have to run this miner all day. I can turn it off and on whenever I want. But obviously with a block being created and a block subsidy being given out roughly every 10 minutes, I want to keep that Bitcoin miner running as much as I can, right? If my electrical cost is zero or close to zero. So what we saw in the early days of mining was individuals mining before the network was really big. And you could mine it just with a regular gaming PC. Then we came to these ASIC specific machines as the hardware developed. And now we've come to a point where basically it's big players are mining. As more and more miners entered the pool, I guess, the hash rate goes up. So the electrical inputs go up. And what Bitcoin has is a difficulty adjustment built into the code. So every 2 weeks, roughly, the Bitcoin difficulty adjustment looks at how fast blocks were mined in the last 2 week period, and it adjusts the difficulty of the puzzle, I guess, that these miners have to solve in order to try and keep the block times as close to 10 minutes as possible. So that's the way the Bitcoin system regulates itself, so that we don't have this large spike of mining and suddenly blocks are mined every 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 2 minutes, right? So it's got this difficulty adjustment built in. Like I said, roughly every 2 weeks, that difficulty gets adjusted up or down, depending on how many more miners have gone online or offline. And that's like its regulating mechanism. So as Bitcoin mining developed, and people obviously, more and more people came to trust Bitcoin, larger investors decided to get involved. And the more miners that come online to support the network and to compete with each other to get the block subsidy, the more the hash rate goes up. Now the hash rate is this chart here. I'll zoom out. So the hash rate is basically the total hash going into solving these puzzles, right? Or winning the block. So here we've got terahash per second, and you can see the last 3 years, regardless of Bitcoin price, I think the black one here is the Bitcoin price, the hash rate is just going up and up and up, right? And if we zoom out to all, we can see down here, from Bitcoin's inception, 2009, through to 2016-17, low hash rates. This would have been the time that we could have been mining from home more economically. And now you can see over the last 5 years, hash rates just absolutely ripping as all these big players come online and they start putting more and more miners online, and obviously more and more energy is going into mining these blocks. So how does Bitcoin help with global energy, and how do I dispel the myth that Bitcoin's boiling the oceans by consuming this much electrical energy? Well, it's all down to incentives, right? So a Bitcoin miner has to stay profitable, right? It's one thing to put all the electrical energy in, win a few Bitcoin, or receive a few Bitcoin as payment. But if your inputs are greater than your reward, well, you're going to go under just like any business, right? You need to be profitable. So these miners have to search out the cheapest energy they can find. And we saw, see if I've got a chart. Don't have a chart here, but we've seen large mining companies or large players basically moving internationally wherever they could find cheap energy. So Kazakhstan was a hot spot for a period of time. But basically these guys, anyone involved in Bitcoin mining, is incentivized to try and find low cost energy, or ideally free energy, right? So we had the Kingdom of Bhutan come out. They'd been secretly mining through a hydroelectric dam, I think it was, basically free energy, and they'd been setting up Bitcoin miners, and I think they'd mined something like 5,000 Bitcoin, right, before any other nation realized what they were doing, before it sort of blew up on X and Twitter and was doing the rounds. But this leads to the point, right? So if I'm incentivized to go and find cheap energy or free energy, this also gives us the opportunity to unlock areas where energy has potentially been landlocked before. So what do I mean by that? Well, all mining companies that are out there, they go and set up wherever they can, right? But they have to take into consideration their profits as well. So they're going to go wherever they're typically close to a port or close to infrastructure and transport, so that they can run pipelines or load ships with whatever it may be, right? Coal, oil, gas deposits. So a lot of this energy that's out there, I think people are misled by the media. They think we're running out of oil and we're running out of all of these resources. It's not actually the case. There's plenty of resources out there. It's just oftentimes it's not economically viable to go out to these places and tap into this energy. But this is where Bitcoin fixes this, because as long as I have a Starlink internet connection and I can tap into a remote energy source, it might be a gas line, it might be a gas reserve, something like that. As long as I can set up as a miner some generation to convert that energy to electricity, I can set up these miners in a 40-foot sea container, very mobile operation. I can tap into these otherwise restricted and locked energy resources, and I can start mining Bitcoin. And once I've mined the Bitcoin and I'm successful in receiving the block reward, basically I can send that anywhere around the world in 10 minutes. So I'm essentially turning a trapped resource, otherwise trapped resource, into cash straight away, right? So I'm not selling it to someone else. I'm not having to set up like Woodside, some giant gas pipeline and load ships and all the rest of it. to convert that energy into and come up with deals with different partners, and maybe some of them globally aren't my friends, or there's laws or there's restrictions. I don't have to do any of that. I can go and tap into these energy resources, mine Bitcoin there and then on site, and once I get the Bitcoin, redeem it instantly for USD or whatever I want, right? So I think Bitcoin's going to be really good for energy costs over time. I think it's going to be very good for unlocking otherwise restricted areas or non-economically viable areas of resources. Now that could be renewables or not renewables, right? Hydroelectric dams, wind farms, solar, they're great, they're kind of free, environmentally friendly, I guess. But even things like gas and oil and other things, right? So yeah, I mean, this is the power of Bitcoin, right? It allows you, it's backed by energy, it's backed by the electrical energy that's gone into it. You can see the hash rate going up over time, which is essentially reflecting its value, right? So every Bitcoin that's being mined has a cost. It has a physical cost. So it's the link between the digital and the physical, and it's essentially converting electricity into value, right? In the hardest money we've ever known. Capped at 21 million coins, like I've said. So something to think about. I think it's one of the biggest FUD topics out there about Bitcoin boiling the oceans, bad for the environment and all the rest of it. But when you think about the incentives for the miners, it's actually couldn't be further from the truth, right? They're incentivized to find cheap energy, free energy, or lowest cost energy at best. And that poses some other questions, right? And I think it's only a matter of time before big companies start realizing the power of this, especially the gas industry. So Woodside and all these other gas companies, when they're not using the gas, they're not sending it down the pipeline, they'll flare it. They'll flare it off. So they're essentially not giving the gas to anyone, and they're having to burn it off while it's not required, right? So here they are, flaring it off, right? So grid stability is another area where Bitcoin can help this, right? Because if this gas plant had Bitcoin miners over here somewhere on the site, ready to go, ready to tap into this and start mining, because remember, we can turn the mining on and off whenever we want. When it's no longer peak times and these gas companies are needing to flare off the gas, we can say, don't do that. Let's just tap into, like, turn on the miners, redirect the gas to us, and we'll start mining Bitcoin. So I think the media's really like twisted everyone's view of, you know, the environment and ESG and this tax credits and blah, 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 without really finding a solution. So, you know, we all want the planet to be better than it is now. We don't want pollution. We don't want, environmental degradation. But tell me, how does a tax actually help solve that problem, right? You go and tax a gas company, a mining company, ultimately they'll come and tax you, the individual, for driving too far or having a V8 engine in your car instead of a electric, whatever it might be. But ultimately these guys with these programs, they're not actually solving the environmental problems, are they? They're just taxing you, you know? So I think this becomes more of a viable option, right? Instead of just saying we'll invent a new tax, it's a way for us to get our hands on on some money, penalise these gas companies or other energy providers, why don't we start figuring out the actual solution? And I think Bitcoin could play a key role in being part of this solution, where we can, like I said here, redirect that gas that's just being flared off, destroying the environment, redirect it into Bitcoin mining and turn that directly into cash. Like, you can't tell me that these money-hungry corporations wouldn't froth on that once they figure out how to do it, once a key player comes in and can set them up with a set and forget kind of all-in-one package. Here you go, we come along, you know, we set you up, we share the subsidies, we share the earnings, or whatever it might be, right? It's a win-win for the Bitcoin miners or whoever does this for them, and it's a win-win for these big companies that are potentially paying carbon credits or tax or whatever they're paying, if they're paying anything they should be, for flaring off this gas and disrupting the environment, right? So I have heard of pockets of this happening. There's a guy on X, I forget his name, but he goes around and he basically sets these things up. He goes and negotiates deals with obviously smaller players than this, but basically says, yeah, look, I want to tap into your gas line when you're flaring, convert that to electricity and run these Bitcoin miners. Whenever you want me to turn off in your peak times and you need the gas, we just go and turn it off, and you let me know when we can turn it back on again. So I think this is the future of energy and how Bitcoin plays its part in making the planet greener, and not just pretending and saying we're going to make it greener by, you know, implementing another tax. But time will tell. But yeah, so that's sort of what I wanted to talk about tonight, just dispelling these myths around Bitcoin bad, uses too much electricity, boils the oceans. Couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. But leave us a comment, like the video, share it around. Anyone that you've tried to explain Bitcoin to might give them a bit of insight to look at it from a different angle, from this angle. And yeah, tell me your thoughts and comments and ideas around other ways that Bitcoin will actually help bring abundant energy, cleaner energy, and make the world or the environment a lot better for everyone. So that's it for this episode. Not sure what I'm going to talk about next one, but stay tuned. Still going to try and get these out every couple of days. And yeah, have a good one.